Good morning, AP Psychology, and welcome to another episode of Galusha's Corner. We're going to take a look at 9.6 today, altruism and aggression. We have two very different topics. We want to describe the variables that contribute to both of these. So this is one of those examples in AP Psych where just the definition alone is not going to be good enough. We're going to need to be able to also point to some of the research findings. So we're looking at aggression and specifically the frustration aggression hypothesis. And then as we transition to altruism, some social learning, which really does apply to both altruism and pro-social behavior and the difference between the two. Okay, let's take a look at what aggression is. So aggression can be defined as a physical or verbal behavior. It's intended to hurt or destroy. So there's an intent behind there. So an example might be a verbal assault on someone that's intended to hurt them. A mugger who physically assaults you is intentional physical behavior. What we need to look at, not necessarily the definition, because that's actually kind of very simplistic, is the causes. We want to break the causes down today into some biological factors. And I think Myers does a fantastic job talking about how the biological factors really adjust the threshold for what will set us off. And so some biological factors might lower our threshold, making it much easier for us to explode and be aggressive. And then there are some psychological and social factors that will pull the trigger, that will actually trigger that, and even more so if the biological factors set the threshold lower. So the biology of aggression might come in a couple of different ways. There might be a genetic link, and what we do have for evidence of that is that identical twins are more likely to share violent tempers. So whenever monozygotic twins share a trait more so than dizygotic or fraternal twins, and more so than siblings, we see a genetic component there. So just your genetic makeup, and as we try to identify that, it looks to live on the Y chromosome for some of us. So that genetic component might be there. Another biological factor of aggression that lowers the threshold would be a frontal lobe. Now that's your part of the brain that goes ahead and controls impulses for you. And as we study as some studies look at violent criminals, we show diminished activity in this region. What that would mean is a diminished ability to control impulses. Our frontal lobe is the thing that kind of holds us back on some of the impulses and desires that we have immediately. So having one that is not as active is going to keep you from being able to control your impulses. And then finally, there's hormones that would affect the biology of aggression, and specifically that of testosterone. So as testosterone circulates in the bloodstream, it activates the neural system that controls aggression. Higher levels of testosterone correlate with irritability, assertiveness, impulsiveness, and a low tolerance for frustration. The more irritable, assertive, and low tolerance for frustration I may be, the lower my biological threshold would be, and then all I need is a societal or psychological factor to go ahead and trigger that. So the biology of aggression is going to combine, imagine a person who's genetically predisposed, has a problem controlling impulses in their frontal lobe, and has high testosterone. They are geared, biologically geared right now with a lower threshold that can set them off. That would require, however, psychological and social factors to go ahead and trigger it. Now, the frustration aggression principle says that blocking of an attempt to achieve some goal frustrates us. And whenever we get frustrated, it can generate aggression. We see this most commonly with road rage. Here I am frustrated that I'm in traffic and I can't get to something. Someone cuts me off. They keep me from my goal of going where I want to be, or they definitely keep me from my goal because now we've rear-ended each other. So here it creates frustration, and that's going to generate the aggression that we see in road rage. There's also reinforcement. If I am someone who has been aggressive in the past and I have gotten what I want, let's say I'm a bully on the playground and I have gotten someone's lunch money. So my aggressive act actually got rewarded by $5 of lunch money. That when we get acts rewarded, we do them again. Live modeling is going to make it more likely for me to be aggressive. So if I watch a parent who is aggressive, And unfortunately, this is where you see the cycle of physical abuse happen. So if you grow up in a household with physical abuse and you have seen a live model being abusive, you learn that behavior, and then we see a more likelihood of people that are in that situation also become abusers when they become parents. You see that cycle of physical abuse, unfortunately. Virtual modeling, whether it's in highly violent video games or the type of violent porn that our society consumes, here we have acts that are being done to different individuals on screen, real with porn, or in a different form with video games. But watching that consistently, I'm not saying it makes you go out and become a shooter at all, but what it does is it desensitizes us and rewrites our kind of wiring for what is acceptable. And so if you kind of spend a lot of time in that virtual modeling, that's going to also make you a little more susceptible to becoming aggressive in different situations. And then finally, social scripts, whether it is through virtual modeling or things that we hear in our society, these social scripts or culturally modeled guide for how to act in a given situation might also make someone predisposed to being more aggressive. In our society, specifically toxic masculinity, where we equate our concept of manliness to being strong and virile and dominant, and not showing emotions. Those are all things that could go ahead and also lead to someone thinking that aggression is the right way to solve that. So if you have someone that biologically is predisposed to a lower threshold, and then you frustrate the person, you show them that it's benefited them in the past with reinforcement, they've seen it done by a father, they're used to consuming large amounts of very misogynistic narrative porn, that maybe includes a rape myth in there. The social scripts are don't cry, be a man, men are tough. If you add all of this together with a biological predisposition, it's no surprise that in our society we have a problem with male violence. We are priming our young men to live in a society that is almost glorifying in that, and teaching our young boys that that's the way to go. If this is depressing, which it should be, Jackson Katz, one of my favorite humans in the world, offers us a way to kind of get out of that tough guys, as he calls it, for men to stand up to other men and say that's not what it actually means to be a man. So that, I think that's great, and we'll kind of explore that when we look at gender in this class. But that's how aggression typically plays out. We focus on men more because of that testosterone element and the way that in society we do talk about male aggression. On a more happy note, social learning, or learning by watching and imitating others, doesn't have to always be negative. Social learning can be positive as well, as you see people do things that are good in their society and you want to do that as well. So social learning can cut both ways. It can teach you to be aggressive. It could also teach you to be altruistic. And so pro-social behavior and altruism, there's a little nuance here. And you can kind of read through this at your own leisure. But I liked this sentence in here. This is why I copied the whole thing. Pro-social behavior refers to a pattern of activity. So again, notice in psychology, we oftentimes have the activity and the motivation separated in different terms. Pro-social behavior refers to a pattern of activity where you're trying to do things that are helpful to your group. Altruism, on the other hand, is the motivation to help others. And it's important when you define altruism that motivation is out of pure regard for their needs rather than how it's going to benefit you. So an altruistic behavior can't be done for just community service requirements at the high school, because here you are trying to benefit yourself. Altruism is really done just out of a pure regard for helping the needs of others. Then the reaction, the thing that you do, you go help work at the soup kitchen, that's the pro-social behavior. So that's the difference between the two. So that's a quick look at aggression and altruism. I hope you find that helpful, and I will see you next time for 9/7. Take care, peace hikers.